Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar series. My name is Lauren Teamy, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Educator for Purdue Extension in Delaware County. Today's webinar is entitled Food Waste in the Environment. This will be a 30-minute webinar offering multiple lesson plans that will teach students how food waste affects water, climate change, and wildlife. Joining me today is John Hawley, the Ag and Natural Resources and Community Development Educator for Purdue Extension in Dearborn County. John is also a supporting partner for the National Farm to School Network. Today, he's going to be introducing the unit, followed by some videos of the individual lessons and activities. I'll finish the webinar highlighting additional resources and the procedure to obtain your certificate of completion for the webinar. And with that, John, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Like Lauren said, my name is John Hawley with Purdue Extension. This food waste in the environment lesson is really one of our, I like to say, most innovative we have. Climate change and the impacts of human activities on the environment is an incredibly popular topic in K through 12 education, especially in biology and science courses. And we hope that you as instructors watching this lesson will follow along, utilize one, two, or all three of the lessons that we're going to discuss today and apply them into your teaching curriculum. As Lauren already mentioned, please don't hesitate to ask any questions, put them in the chat, or you can always directly contact your Purdue Extension County Ag and Natural Resource Educator. But with that, we're going to go ahead and play lesson number 1, which is food waste and water, and that'll start on page 6 of your teaching guide there. You can see on the screen. And I'd like to thank our colleague Rebecca Kowitz, who initially recorded this full-length instructional webinar. So with that, let's get straight to lesson 1 here.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Cates, and I'm the Urban Agriculture Extension Educator with Purdue Extension in Lake County, Indiana. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a lesson plan, Food Waste and Water Quality, which is a lesson in the unit of lesson plans, Food Waste in the Environment, available through the Nature of Teaching at purdue.edu/nature. So first I'm going to share my screen. And if you type in purdue.edu/nature into your browser, this is where you will go, which is the home page for the Nature of Teaching. You can get to the food waste lessons by clicking the Formal Curriculum tab and Food Waste. Food Waste in the Environment is one of the top lessons. You can click Download and you're brought to this free download page. You'll see that there are 2 links, one to the lesson itself and one to a mini landfill video, which will provide you a video that you can use or you can share with your students on how to create the mini landfill activity. The overview for this unit of lesson plans talks to you about the estimated time, the standards, vocabulary, and any required materials you'll need for all of the lessons in this unit. There are also teacher notes so that you can feel like you're the expert in this topic. We include information on the activity and also eutrophication. If we scroll down further, lesson 1 is food waste and water. So that's the lesson we're focusing on for this video. This lesson includes standards on reading and science. And this lesson teaches students how landfills are made and how food waste in landfills affects water quality. It should take about 50 minutes. So for this activity, you're going to need the mini landfill video, which we saw was available at the website, or printout of the instruction worksheet, which is below in this lesson plan. And so you can show students a printout of instructions on how to build their landfill if you don't want to use the video, or if you want to give them the added opportunity of reading an instruction sheet. You're also going to need all of these materials to build the mini landfill, which include empty 2-liter bottles, which you could have students bring in ahead of time or collect whatever way you see fit. You're also going to need spray bottles with water for each group of students, biodegradable food dye, sheets of recycled newspaper, cups, soil, containers for soil, and several other things to create the lesson, all things that you should be able to find at your standard store, such as Walmart or Target or anywhere that you shop. So for this lesson, you're going to introduce the term food waste, since it is the first lesson of this unit. You're going to ask students where food waste goes when it's thrown away. You'll be surprised to hear some of the answers. This is for primarily 3rd through 5th grade students. If you look at the standards, there are some 2nd grade and a lot of 5th grade, some middle school standards. So it definitely ranges, but primarily 2nd through 5th grade is what this lesson plan is intended for. And a lot of students might not know that when food waste is thrown away into the trash, that it ends up in a landfill. So you can introduce the term landfill and also landfill leachate, which is the liquid that comes from the water traveling through the trash in a landfill that goes through the landfill and can sometimes end up in our groundwater. The video, the mini landfill video, provides some visuals for this, and there are also more information in the teacher's notes. Then you'll have students build their own mini landfill. And this is something that they can do in the classroom or at home with the right materials. After students build their mini landfill, you can have them see the leachate come through the landfill and discuss what that might do to groundwater and also to rivers, ponds, wildlife, and humans, because all of our watershed is connected with our groundwater. So our surface water is also going to be affected. Then you can explain the eutrophication cycle, which is a really big word that we have visuals for below. And so we also have information in the teacher's notes. And then you can have students complete the eutrophication sheet. And that is below the instructions for building a mini landfill. So students will need to cut out each of these pictures, and the pictures are numbered. And so you would glue or tape these pictures to where they go on this worksheet. And then the worksheet includes a step-by-step description of what eutrophication is. And here is a completed example of a eutrophication sheet. So they can see how their eutrophication sheet should look when they're done and how eutrophication works and leads to reduced water quality. We have directions in the procedure for building the mini landfill, and also directions for the eutrophication sheet. We also include a tip that the mini landfill activity can be used to teach engineering design by providing an array of materials. So materials in addition to what we require in the required materials, that students can use to protect groundwater from leachate. So maybe not just the clay and plastic liners that were normally found in landfills. Maybe they want to engineer a different way to protect our groundwater from landfill leachate. And they can test the effectiveness of these different materials. Maybe it's Play-Doh, maybe it's paper, maybe it's different things that they can find around their house, especially if you're doing a virtual learning experience. Then at the end of the lesson plan, you're going to have students explain the process of eutrophication using their worksheets that they created that they can take home and then explain to their families, and also have them review what they learned in the lesson by asking questions that we provide here in the procedure, such as what is leachate and who and what is affected by leachate. So that is the food waste and water lesson from the Food Waste and Environment unit of lesson plans available through the Nature of Teaching. It's something that students can do in the classroom or at home, creating their own mini landfill and building their own eutrophication worksheet. We hope you enjoyed this lesson and come back and see us soon.
All right, would like to thank once again our colleague Rebecca Cates. I did mispronounce her name the first time. I really like that lesson because it walks the students through several real life examples concerning the impacts of landfills and really in a very hands-on and direct way addresses specific topics like the leachate and so on, and gives the students a chance to see on a very small scale the impacts of food waste in the environment themselves. So that was lesson number 1, food waste and water, starting on page 6. As a reminder, this curriculum, the food waste in the environment curriculum, has 3 total lessons. As Rebecca mentioned in lesson 1, there are targeted grade levels and standards. There's an estimated time for each lesson, so you're not guessing how much time you have to prepare and present this lesson between class periods. There's also a list of required materials that come along, as well as the procedures included for the hands-on activities. With each 3 of these lesson plans, we're not going to read everything verbatim. That's what the instructional guides are there for. However, we're going to hit on the high notes and discuss the most important concepts included within each lesson. So as always, if you have additional questions, throw them in our comment box below or get in touch with us directly. But let's move on now to lesson number 2, which is food waste and climate change. My colleague Lauren on the call will be giving a directional lesson on this here. So I'll get to our video.
Hi, my name is Lauren Teamy, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Educator for Purdue Extension, Delaware County. Today we're going to go through the activities in Lesson 2, Food Waste and Climate Change, which are part of the unit, Food Waste in the Environment. For this activity, you'll want to break up your students into small groups. All you'll need after that are some cups and some ping pong balls for each of your groups. You'll have one student stand at one end of the table and the other student stand at the other end. The sole student will have the cup with all of the ping pong balls, and all of the students on the other end will have a cup themselves. Each of these cups represents the landfill in which food waste goes. These ping pong balls represent methane. So for the first part of this activity, the student will throw only a few ping pong balls down the table to the other students. Most likely they will catch them. This shows that a little bit of food waste only produces a little bit of methane. The second part of this activity, the single student will again collect all of the ping pong balls and then throw all of them down the table. This shows the amount of methane that is produced when a lot of food waste is added into the landfill. From here, you'll want to make sure that you mix up the students so that way each student has an opportunity to both throw the balls, or methane in this case, and then also students are able to catch it. At the very end, you'll want to discuss what all of the balls mean again and reiterate the importance of food waste and how it affects the environment. So for this second activity, we're going to play a fun game of tag. So for this purposes, we're just going to use a schematic, but you would have 2 circles outside, preferably. And this can be either made with chalk or spray paint or jump ropes, whatever you have handy. You'll have a smaller inner circle, and this represents the landfill. Surrounding that, you'll have the atmosphere, and so a larger circle outside of that. For round 1, you'll have 2 students in the middle, and these will be representing methane. Surrounding them, in between the 2 circles, you'll have 5 gas collectors. The rest of the students will stand off to the side and observe for this first round. From here, the methane will want to try and get through the atmosphere. Most likely, the gas collectors are going to tag them or collect and prevent them from making it to the atmosphere. This represents if a small amount of food waste is added to the landfill and the amount of methane that is produced. Most likely, it's going to be collected and it's not going to make it to the atmosphere. So this would actually not happen. However, in later rounds, you'll add more methane to this center circle or more methane to the landfill, indicative of more food waste being added to the landfill. So as you add more students to this center circle, and then they try to make it through to the atmosphere, they're going to be more apt to get there because the landfill isn't made to collect that or keep it from escaping to the atmosphere. So as more food waste is added in, more methane is produced, and this is able to make it through the atmosphere and therefore contributing to climate change. This is a really great activity that helps demonstrate to students how a lot of food waste added into a landfill creates a lot of methane, which eventually escapes into the atmosphere, contributing to climate change.
All right, I want to thank Lauren for that great lesson. Let me reshare my screen here. That one really walks students through a lot of the science, actually getting into the science of, what we're seeing with, what comes out of a landfill, actually what we deal with as far as the impacts in the atmosphere and in the environment surrounding us, and in a very neat and engaging way allows the students to better understand, like I've already mentioned, how the environment is actually impacted, not just with scientific terms and figures and charts, but actually getting to do some fun hands-on activities. That is the best part of the Nature of Teaching program, and one of the best parts of lesson number 2, food waste and climate change. So we will move on now to our final lesson, lesson number 3, food waste and wildlife. And I will actually present that one on my screen myself, and we'll walk through. And as always, if you have questions or comments, just feel free to let us know or get in touch with your local county extension educator. Looks like my screen should be showing there. And so when it comes to lesson 3, food waste and wildlife, you're going to be running about 50 minutes. So be prepared for that, about one typical class session. This lesson applies a lot of the principles introduced in the first 2, but goes a little more directly into, animals, wildlife, and how, examples such as fish and birds can be impacted by our wastes and what we find in the environment. So as far as required materials, you'll want to make sure that each group of your students has 5 copies of the trash and food and fish and bird cards on cardstock if possible. So that is included in your packet. So we'll walk through that right here. So here are the fish and bird note cards. Pretty neat to see, a nice basic little graphic there. And I'm starting on page 13 for lesson number 3, for those of you following specifically in your guide there. If you have spray paint or chalk, that would be incredibly useful for this lesson as we walk through the procedure. If you have bandanas or some other material similar, that would work. If you can, one color for one and half for another. So red and blue, black and white, whatever works for you. And then one biodiversity comparison sheet per student. That is here at the very last page of your manual. You can see the biodiversity comparison sheet right here. So you'll just need to have enough copies for all the students in your class. So we walked through part of the materials to prepare for the procedure. The cardstock is useful for a lot of these activities, not only in this curriculum, the food waste environment, but for a lot of the nature of teaching programs, because students are not just sitting at their desk, they're moving around a classroom, perhaps even outside. So if you're able to have access to cardstock, that is very helpful. And a lot of activities too, if you perhaps have a, access to a notepad or a clipboard, that would be helpful as well. So you'll want to start by guiding the students through the picture this activity. And those instructions are right here on the page right here. You can walk through those directions. Gives the students a nice visual for better understanding this, this part of the lesson here. Moving on, to explain to students that there are more different kinds of animals that can live in a forest than compared to a farm field or a landfill. So I always advise instructors with this lesson that they can go beyond what is just mentioned in the curriculum. If you have the time and the resources and you have the interest, do some research into biodiversity. A lot of our Purdue Extension educators work with farmers, and what we learn about the importance of biodiversity when planting certain types of crops or adding certain types of benefits to their land, you're going to find more animals in a diversified forest than you are in a corn, soybean, or wheat field. Nothing against the corn, soybean, and wheat, but that's just the facts of our biodiversity. There's more food to forage on, there's more cover, there's more native plants. And so when you look at an Indiana forest, at one point, Indiana was 99% woodland. You see hundreds and hundreds of thousands of species. And so that's where you can really drive that point of biodiversity home. And you can write on the board this exact definition. Biodiversity means the variety of life or the number of different living things. And there are so many examples that students love. You can mention cardinals, raccoons, snakes, other types of birds and fish. I always find that what makes these sort of lessons most effective is when you find something the students are really interested in. So that is number 3. Going on to part 4 in the procedure, you want to explain to students that scientists are researching ways to grow more food to feed the growing number of people on Earth, but that science shows that we can feed all the hungry people in the world with the food that we're already throwing away. That is a huge point that you can drive home. And there are 2 important questions you can ask the students to really begin some good, interesting debate and discussion among the groups. The first would be, what might happen to biodiversity if we plant more farm fields and take away more forest? What could be the negative impacts? What might be the needed positive impacts? Debate that. Talk about it as a class. Point B, explain that biodiversity would decrease as we plant more farm fields. So knowing that we're already producing enough food if we stopped wasting so much, drive that point home again and discuss that we've already got enough farms. We need to reinvigorate and help those farms. But at the same time, we need to not cut down more forest. We need to preserve, protect, and in some cases, even grow and expand our forest. Then go on to ask students, since we already grow enough food to feed everyone, but we're currently throwing about 1/3 of that food away, what can we do to protect biodiversity? Can we make farms more efficient? Can we waste less food in the home? That's part of the food waste curriculum with the nature of teaching, is asking those questions and engaging those students in that critical thinking. Explain that reducing food waste can help protect biodiversity. Moving on, explain that food waste in landfills affects the wildlife directly and in many other ways. Explain the relationship in your teacher's materials between wildlife and food waste. Then guide your students through the wildlife card game or the wildlife run game, and you can see that below. And then really, getting to point 7 here in the lesson, ask students how else food waste affects wildlife. Remind them if they did complete lessons 1 and 2, and we do advise that because that would help with as far as the comprehension and the effectiveness of this lesson. But going back to lessons 1 and 2, that food waste affects wildlife by affecting the water they drink and the water they live in some cases by contributing to climate change, and that affects the whole planet. Explain that, if you throw away or dispose of products in a water source, perhaps such as a river, if you throw that bottle in the river, or if the trash, there's a flood and the trash washes away in the river, it's going to end up somewhere. And in a lot of cases, it can affect wildlife. One optional example to assist with this would be to take a 6-pack of soda can holders, the little plastic holders, and explain to students that it's effective and best advised to cut those up to protect wildlife from getting trapped in them. And you can use many other examples as well. There are notes on the mini landfill and eutrophication in the teacher's materials and the climate change according to a kid video included in lesson 2. There's certainly nothing wrong with using those. So as I mentioned, there are specific instructions for the picture this activity, as well as for the directions for the wildlife card game. So you can see some of the examples right here written out for you. Always love the lessons guides because it's very specific and is going to answer most of your questions. But as always, if you run across something, feel free to get in touch with us. You can also see on page 15 directions for the wildlife run game, as well as specific examples of how to go about that. So this was lesson number 3, food waste and wildlife. If you have any questions, as I said, please let us know. But best of luck with your lesson, and thank you for watching. And Lauren, I will turn it over to you.
Yes, thanks, John. I also really enjoy this lesson plan and this unit. It really has a lot of really great material in there, and then also it's applicable in so many different ways, and it can be done in a classroom. You don't necessarily have to be outside. So those are all really good things, especially if it's raining. So thank you again for joining us for the Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar entitled Food Waste in the Environment. If you enjoyed this webinar, I encourage you to click on the card in the top right of your screen to visit our Nature of Teaching YouTube channel. Here you can view sneak peeks of lesson plans that are directly related to the webinar that you just completed. To obtain your certificate of completion for this 30-minute webinar, please click on the second card in the top right of your screen. Here you'll be directed to give us some feedback on the program, and once that's completed, you'll automatically be emailed your certificate of completion. And that survey just gives us some feedback so we can always be improving. We hope that you enjoyed learning with us today and consider participating in additional professional development webinars offered by the Nature of Teaching team. As you can see on this slide here, you can reach out to any of us and we would be more than happy to give you more information on these webinars and specifically on the food waste ones. Until then, thank you for engaging our youth with nature.